All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. Thanks for joining another webinar hosted by Squirro. Today we have a great panel. I'm really looking forward to this topic. This is a topic that seems to come up, at least for me, all the time. Everywhere I'm speaking, the audience is always wondering about who is getting pilots to production and how do they make them actually be successful. So that's exactly what we're going to cover today on this panel. We have two great speakers today. I will be your moderator. My name is Dave Hannibal. I will try to just moderate and act as just the fly on the wall here because you don't probably want to hear from me. You'd rather hear from our two great panelists. So without further ado, let's turn this over and let's get started. So let's start with some introductions. Ladies first.
Sure. Well, thanks for setting the stage, David. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining in. My name is Nivedita. I am based in Singapore. Over past 2 decades, I've been fortunate to be operating at the intersection of, well, AI and emerging tech, digital innovation, finance, and policy across startups, corporates, and public sector. Most notably, I've had the privilege of working on AI use cases and digital public infra for Reserve Bank Innovation Hub, World Bank, and the Indian government. Launching Asia Private Capital Partnerships vertical for Microsoft Asia, and launching Asia's first digital gold fintech product. Um, I was exposed to AI very early in my career during my time at HSBC back in like 2007. So it has been almost 2 decades. And I interned at a AI startup then, which is now a unicorn called Unifor. So I have operated in this field for a while, and though it's rapidly advancing now and there's new developments every day, I am super excited to share with all of you what are the developments we are seeing, how businesses can get AI ready and leverage the value of AI. So excited to share my insights, and let's dive in. Over to Dorian.
Nice to meet you all. Thank you for having me. Dorian is my name, one of the co-founders of Squirro, a long career in digital for the last 30 years. Looking forward to discuss what we have on topic today. Back to you, David.
Thank you both. So today we're going to do, just in terms of run of house, what are we going to cover today? We're going to try to get through a bunch of different topics. So we're going to get through actually 4 today. Our goal is to get you all educated on all 4 of these. Because of such high demand, we wanted to finish on maximizing AI ROI. We touched on that on the last webinar, and it was really critical. People were really interested. So we actually wanted to bring that topic back into this panel, go deeper, and help the audience on that. But really, where we're going to get started is why AI readiness is crucial, right? Maybe just to like set the stage, right? To me, AI readiness, it's really about being successful in your AI adoption, being successful in scaling AI and integrating it into the organization. This has many facets, right? Infrastructure, governance, right? Skill set, cultural alignment, right? These are all important things. And most companies I'm speaking to see this from a knowledge management perspective, right? How can I decrease costs, make my employees more efficient? How can I use AI to move the needle for profitability for my organization, right? And when we think about this, yes, this has application in small organizations where it's a 5-person PE shop or a hedge fund, but really the big ROI that this is going to have is your large enterprises, not the 100 users, but the tens of thousands of users. And so with that, maybe I'll turn it over to you, Nivedita, to just kind of talk through some of the things that you're seeing, right? And just kind of set the stage for us from your perspective for AI readiness.
Sure. I haven't come across a lot of orgs today that are not excited about AI. Most orgs are allocating some part of their digital budget towards towards AI, at least a pilot to see the value of it. If we look at some stats, around $1 million annually is the average corp AI investment, $1 million. And of course, there's plans to increase it 10 to 15% YOY. However, surprisingly, and that's the crux of the discussion today, the failure rate is 2x, which is twice as that of non-AI IT projects. And we'll discuss the causes of that as we progress in the presentation. And around 30 to 50% of Gen AI projects are abandoned after POC over value concerns. This justification to the CFO org around what is the value generated, is this a good ROI? That is the I would say a big debate within orgs that affects the scaling up of pilots to production. Now, still with that in mind, orgs are increasing their spending. IDC has estimated that just the infra part of AI, the server storage bit, that market from will double to around $60 billion in 2027. That's how much orgs are willing to spend on, I would say, readiness, infra readiness around AI. So there's willingness, there's money, but let's see what goes wrong in leveraging the most value despite all this spend and effort. I would say, before we advance to the next slide, is AI readiness to me is what salt and sugar is to your food. If it is not there, then the food might taste bland despite all your efforts. So looking at the elements, which slides we are on?
You
Yep.
want to talk?
Can we move to slide?
You're broken up. Can you repeat that?
I think we momentarily lost Nivedita.
Okay. So while her audio is coming back, Dorian, maybe I'll turn to you just to kind of finish on a point that was raised, in terms of, all the money and capital going into this, but yet a whole bunch of, work that needs to be done up front. You've seen and have told some stories about institutions trying to get AI ready, and the amount of spend, but the struggle. Maybe just touch on one or two stories while she comes back and joins us.
Sure. Thanks for making the point. Also, Nivedita will momentarily just come back. I think she's coming back now. Can you hear us again, Nivedita? Not for yet. Okay. So just actually this morning in Zurich, it's lunchtime here. All the guests over in Asia, but also the ones in the US or over in America, generally speaking. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Actually, this morning I had a conversation with a large Eastern European banking group. And Piotr, the head of AI innovation, who was recently appointed to that position in that group, laid out to me a bit what he found when he joined that group at the beginning of the year. This is a very large group, very successful, and in that respective country, for NDA reasons, I can't disclose who it is. And he said, look, back in 22, my colleagues, he was then in another position at bank, started to look at what AI could be in terms of transformational power for the bank. But it was largely small scale little tests. He wouldn't even call it a pilot. Last year, obviously, this proliferated across the bank, and many folks in different parts of the bank started to really go at that. It was, he said, to some extent, surely coordinated as the board starts to map out an AI strategy, But if you looked on the ground, it was very much dispersed in terms of this group did this group did that. So there was no coordination, there was no sharing in terms of technology base, etc. And he told me this morning when they started to draw a line in the sand in last year, what they noticed is they will never get to anywhere scale, production, or actual business value. Nevertheless, they have spent millions already in all of that work. And he said that was a very uncomfortable moment of truth for them, where they had to come back and kind of like say, well, we probably need to kind of like go at that a bit differently. And in the preparation of today's webinar, we spoke about that. We had that same conversation a number of times over the past weeks and months. And yeah, I think that's a bit of the challenge to get from these early stage test, pilot, POC type things into a bigger production element. But
Yeah.
I see that Nivedita is back. Maybe you can pick that up where you see that going.
Nivedita, can you hear us now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. So maybe just to come back to you, and bring this over to I think where you were headed, which is, talking about projects and why they fail, right? So as Dorian noted, millions spent and no resolution. I had one the other day where they did 13 different pilots across 13 different business silos on 13 different RAG solutions, and yet their business user needs to communicate with all. And so all they did was just create a monster amount of tech debt. So, maybe from your perspective, as you think about, AI projects, how to assess AI readiness, how to get them to scale. Obviously, it's a lot of fun to, toss a couple of developers into a project, show the board some cool little shiny toy, some little widget that you produced. It's another thing to actually deploy this to get real value. So maybe if you want to talk to us a little bit about, what you see are the three main reasons why AI projects fail, and how you're kind of looking at this and supporting customers.
Sure. So to me, I look at AI readiness of any org on three dimensions. I call that the AI readiness tripod. It's data, infra, and then strategy and people. I'll start with data. Look, any org today has a variety of sources of structured and unstructured data across various formats, residing in various silos. And while all orgs are keen to leverage that data, um, a lot of times they underestimate the work needed to integrate all of that data together. So there's cleanliness, cleaning the data, integrating it, eliminating inconsistencies, and putting it all into a unified data warehouse. All of that is more a hygiene factor now for use into AI or Gen AI model. So that plus the governance around data, the security, privacy, etc. That's one leg of the tripod. The second is around infrastructure. Fine, you have all the data hygiene in place, but what's your plan around cloud deployment? Do you want on-prem? Do you want a hybrid model? In my experience, financial institutions specifically want a strict control over their data, rightfully so. So they either opt for a full deployment in their private cloud or, at best, a hybrid cloud, depending on the use cases. Plus, there needs to be investment in the compute storage, as well as in the cooling and power requirements that AI sometimes gets a bad name for. For the sustainability aspects, but it does needs it does need significant amount of investment and readiness around the infrastructure. Third, and I would say very important, but sometimes overlooked bit is the strategy and people bit. Strategy would be: did you choose the right use cases for AI? Um, Not all problems are best solved using AI or Gen AI. And so just doing a pilot for the sake of it versus is this the right business problem where this hammer called AI will help me? That is very, very important. Um, and then second thing is how do you judge success of that problem? What was the starting benchmark? Is it aligned with the KPIs? And then comes the buy-in with not just the execs for the resources, but also the various line of businesses to make the data available, um, but also to drive successful adoption. It is ultimately people who are going to make it successful by giving you the data and insights, and it is ultimately people who are going to adopt it. So there's a lot of change management that needs to be done, and the trust issues, etc., need to be managed and mitigated around job losses, which are quite prevalent. So this tripod is also very, very important and needs to be managed. I like to mention um, an example around the need of or importance of data integration. Right, I've spoken to a large financial org that runs several line of businesses, right? So there's auto loans, there's credit card loans, credit cards, and then there's home loans. And all three line of businesses run as fairly independent orgs. They have their own CRMs, their own databases. But now the central AI team is struggling with the fact that the data elements captured per customer across all the different line of businesses are not very consistent. um, they've come across instances where for the same customer, the address on the credit card application versus the home loan or the auto loan, for legitimate reasons, the address is different or some other common parameter is different.
Mhm.
And then they have to figure out how to reconcile it and publish a common reference data across all these line of businesses that needs significant usage of rules, establishing a kind of consensus between the different teams, and then cleaning that and having a consistent internal source of single source of truth. So
Yeah.
that's the kind of work needed in data readiness. Otherwise, the model will be garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah, yeah, and that I really like these three legs of the stool that you present here. I think we talk about things very similarly, right? The how do you think about going into a large enterprise and solving, if it's all first party sensitive private data, how do you deal with that security and privacy, right? How do you deal with the scale of being able to help a culture shift of thousands or tens of thousands of users? Dorian, any insights you want to add on here? I think you've got lots of stories I'm sure you could tell about this. Maybe just pull out one would be great.
Yeah, sorry. I think it's a turning point. I spoke about that banking group. I had another conversation this morning with a large telecoms group where we also talked about the rollout and how that goes and how that goes on. And with that, we come across the same elements. There was talk about, we go now into very much a detail, cloud readiness. This telecom group has started to invest heavily in a hyperscaler-based platform, but at the same time, they also have started to look at alternatives already. Why? Because none of these hyperscalers can immediately kind of like fit all of the requests that this large group has. So they're back in the game of kind of like piecing it together from a kind of like a Lego fashion. Immediately adds complexity. We also had to talk about the buy-in. We had a longer contract negotiation phase as well. And, as simple as it sounds, what is an AI model? What is an AI model? In old terms, when you had kind of like a random forest Symbian type model built, you indeed could sort of export that and use that on another platform. I mean, Hugging Face or so is a platform where you can exchange these models. And the moment you go into these more modern architectures like they're used today, where you have on-the-spot inference based on some input, there is no model anymore. There is an output, but there is nothing as kind of like a finished product that is exportable post the moment you consume it. That as an example, recommendation or that prompting. Obviously, you can export the prompt, but the underlying elements, how that prompt, or better say the answer to that prompt was generated, no, that's simply a sequence of symbolic computes. And as funny as it sounds, right, the legal department of that particular company is by far not kind of like familiar with these type of challenges. So they nearly derailed the whole process because they couldn't box in what they've learned in the past years on what AI models are into that new domain, what we now see with these foundational models. So to a point, I think it was made before, strategy and people and process buy-in is as important as all the rest, because otherwise you actually fail at start.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's actually a great segue. Maybe back to you, Nivedita. You came up with this concept of 4 pillars of AI readiness, and Dorian, you kind of alluded to a couple of these here, right? What is your strategy? How do you then align that strategy to the outcomes you want to accomplish, so we don't have failed pilots, that we do get to production, that we do get employees using generative AI so that we can capture the ROI and the value that we were hoping for. So maybe, Nivedita, to you, talk us through what you think are really some of these key elements of your 4 pillars of AI readiness.
Sure. Adding to what Dorian just shared, I would say it starts with strategy, getting that right. Apart from aligning to key business goals, like I had said earlier, identify AI apt use cases. I'll again mention an example: an AI startup that is helping an investment research company um, just improve the productivity of analysts with doing all the research and generating IC notes. Now, they realized that while AI was great at reading annual reports, like the textual parts of it and summarizing it, it wasn't very good at calculating the ratios or with numbers. So they had to not rely on the standard LLMs that are available in the market, easy to use, but not so accurate for their specific use case, which was apart from the text analysis of the data from annual reports, also calculate the ratios, etc. So that's one example of knowing what can you solve with AI and what can you not solve with AI, rather Gen AI. Okay, so apart from that, picking up the right use cases early on, which can show impact early, given that there's always this ROI question hanging on your head. And this is partly about how do you drive change, pick early wins. So that prioritization is very important. And apart from it, establishing early guardrails so that you have guidance frameworks in place. Now, we have help at hand. Every country, every regulator has, I would say, put their foot forward, established some frameworks such as the Fairness, Ethics, Accountability, and Transparency Principles, FEAT principles by Monetary Authority of Singapore for financial institutions in Singapore. That's a great reference framework. Then there's another one, which is ISO 42001, which is for AI management systems. How do you establish, maintain them? And it's a big reference document to go through, but it underlines great set of principles, best practices for orgs to go through, set in place before embarking on, I would say, larger scale deployment and investment. So from strategy, then coming to data integration, I have emphasized the need of data hygiene and a unified, clean, consistent source of data. in form of a data warehouse or data lake. And of course, working on the security aspects of it, compliant to the law of the land. Uh, could be GDPR, could be RBI guidelines, or with payment data. Coming to the third pillar would be tech infra, and Dorian has touched on it. Followed by people again. It's a lot of change management, adoption training, and very importantly, having early conversations around what does success mean for me, what will be the, I would say, reference metric, and a reasonable payback period to look at. In my experience, most dogs look at a payback period of 3 years. That's reasonable. And yeah, having a starting reference, then what do you want to achieve? What will be the metrics you measure, and having a continuous, I would say, monitoring and updation of that, so that you can course correct if needed.
Yeah. Yeah, the way I kind of talk to organizations is, look, pick a use case that is high value, right? And you almost want to go back to your Harvard Business School, kind of mental map, right? Or the Eisenhower matrix is the other way it's always talked about, right? Find your highest value use case with your lowest, time to value, and start there, because at the end of the day, all of these things cost time and they cost money to do. And so the faster you can show to your bosses that, look, I am going to help you meet company goal, right? The company goal is increase profitability. Company goal is decrease cost, right? The faster you can take AI, right? Because AI is very capable of doing these things. Choose a use case that is aligned to that goal at the top. There you go, right? You're going to look like a rock star in your organization. And that does involve all four of these elements of AI readiness, but just to kind of tie it together, that's kind of how I always see it. And that's kind of the, shall we say, gospel I try to preach to folks, to not overcomplicate it, pick high value, low effort that then shows and aligns to the company goal for the year, right? It's only February 27th. I would presume everyone knows their goals for the year, right? And we want to align to that and help people get there. So maybe moving, Dorian, to you, as we think about now going from how do I become an AI ready organization, right? What do I need to do to get ready? The next thing is then, okay, now I feel ready, but what do I do? How do I deploy this securely, right? It's my first party data. If I think about being a bank, right? When I was in the banking world, is all about differentiation based on trust. You trust me as your banker, even though I have similar products to every other bank down the road, right? So, it's all about that first party data, which obviously has a huge impact on being secure and private. And these aren't small organizations, right? These are tens to hundreds of thousands of people in their rollouts. So if maybe you could kind of pivot us and talk us into, how do you see that pilot to production challenge, and where can we, improve that and look at that differently?
We spoke a couple of minutes ago on that large Eastern European banking group, and that is exactly the slide that opened up the conversation with that team over there. Multiple pilots, multiple parts of the bank. Most of them, not my words, theirs, pretty shallow. Few people, few documents. And as an example, no access control. Most of those, quote, chat pilots in companies, and by the way, chat is boring. There's more interesting stuff than that. And we come to that maybe, is essentially chat with your employee handbook or chat with publicly available investment research. Now, well, that's simply a new guise of the good old enterprise search piece. It's not necessarily something very useful. Why? Most of the information in larger enterprises, smaller by the way too, have for good reason a number of security elements put around them. Who is allowed to see them? What's the context that gives you permission to see that user group or become part of that user group? If you're in Department A and allowed to see stuff from Department B, again, often for good reason. In a banking environment for regulatory purposes, say in a pharmaceutical company, often because of regulatory reasons, again, in the way to keep compliant with very strict pharma guidelines and regulations. Now, most of those pilots kind of like hit the wall in the moment you talk with them about security, privacy, and permission enabling. Why? Because those pilots have never been meant to do that. But in the moment you go to large scale production, you need to have an answer for that. And that's where we see at the moment lots of these AI projects hit a wall. Now, I sometimes jokingly refer to this as a bit of a Squid Game. You all know that famous TV series currently. Lots of contestants starting, few contestants ever getting to the end. And it's a bit the same thing here, because let's suppose you actually have mastered the security, privacy, and permission enablement element, which in itself is hard. The next obstacle is going to wait for you. Scale. Most of these early stage pilots are done with, I don't know, a couple of dozens, a couple of thousands, maybe even a couple of 10,000 documents. But a mid to large scale enterprise has millions of documents. And then you need to be able to deal with that. And there is a massive, massive, massive difference between a few documents and millions of documents. I often say that if customers or prospects ask me, if you want to operate an index with millions of documents, better go to someone who has done that at least for 12 months, better 18 months, at scale, with at least 1 million documents, with at least 1,000 user groups. And if they have not provable, oh, by the way, 20% velocity, so, you know, change frequency of the documents over the year. If whoever claims to have done that has not proof that they have done that, rather go elsewhere. Why? Indexing operations, which is core to any of these retrieval augmented generation architectures, index operation at that scale is not something that many, many people ever have done at scale. And there is a learning curve to be paid. Just one element, right? In an enterprise situation, you will have dev, stage, pre-prod, prod environments. How do you transition indices through those environments? Question number one. Question number two, in the moment you have these large scale, above million document level indices, especially with vectorized embeddings, etc., these indices become actually large, much larger than the old good enterprise search indices. So you need to think about different strategies, how to operate these. It's a bit technical today, but you need to go into things like index swapping and the like. Now, if you have never done that before, you're going to run into that obstacle. Now, if you have done all of that, you're going to get to the next one. You will also want to integrate not just textual data, you also want to integrate numerical data. And if you got beyond that, you will want to have a conversation, or better say the CFO will want to have a conversation with you about the cost pile you start to pile up for that wonderful AI deployment you have concocted for your company. Because as opposed to what many people think or see in pilot stage, hey, it's easy, it's doable, and it's cheap. At scale, it's neither of those. Why? Because, you know, you're actually going to consume substantial amounts of tokens. While prices come down, you know, lots of users make lots of token requests, aka big bill. And so, you know, there are a couple of these obstacles that you need to cycle through. And what I see today reminds me a bit, and would be curious how you see that, Nivedita, how you see that, because I saw that with e-commerce. I saw that when the internet came about, right? With e-commerce some 15, 20 years ago, when it really took off, I saw many folks who said, oh, I can build an online shopping basket. True, it's trivial. Take a bit of JavaScript, it's done. But the whole integration, right, into a product information management catalog with, as an example, digital assets that really reflect your product online, different device sizes, all the integration into logistics operation, finance operation, and the orchestration of this all, it's a bit more complex than a simple JavaScript library, right? And that's actually the thing that I see at the moment, where the wheat can get separated from the chaff. I don't know. Okay, what's your view on that?
Nivedita, you're on mute, by the way. Okay.
Yeah.
There you go. I don't know if you were able to hear Dorian's last question, but he was just asking, what's your view in terms of how do you see these challenges and these organizations trying to get over all of these challenges in terms of their AI adoption, right? Didn't know if you
Um,
had a story to tell there.
sure. I have in my conversations seen most of what Dorian mentioned. I will add, though, on the first point, right, um, about the stringent security and privacy requirements, especially when it comes to your user data, right? I have seen organizations, especially financial ones that I interact with a lot. They have to guard it, right? So then, when it comes to deployments, why should I give my, or like, how do I protect my customer data from going into your model? And that is a very common, I would say, interjection that startups or even AI models get. And to that, I've seen some best practices emerge around that as well, like redacting all the PIIs before
Hmm.
feeding it into the actual model, so that you are guarding your PII at all costs and complying with all these stringent security and privacy requirements that you have to adhere to. That is one way. Um, the other was role based access that Dorian alluded to. So that is definitely being used by orgs. Redacting PII is one that I have seen. Yeah, that is very very common and a big fear that I don't want to risk exposing my private customer data to any external LLM, which is why a lot of orgs are also insisting that whether it's an in-house product or an external provider, please come and deploy your product on my tenant so that I
Hmm.
have full control over I would say, the environment and the security of it, so that my data is not leaving my environment. Now,
Yep.
of course, there are trade-offs around costs, and is all of like a full on-prem needed, or can you do like a hybrid bit for
Hmm.
scalability and agility reasons? But that's a, I would say, optimization problem to be discussed separately. But yeah, the first bullet is what I see is, I would say, the most important um, uh, conversation point in any production scale adoption challenge, because the risk of exposing your customer data is very very high. It's your reputation, and yeah, that means a lot to financial logs.
Yeah, it goes back to what I said before about my banking example. It's about trust, right? And if you break that trust, someone's going to, go somewhere else. And so being able to say, not only in using Gen AI, can we increase profitability, decrease cost? It's about how do you do that in a way that can meet those strict security guidelines, right? And I think that's one of the reasons why these types of webinars are so important, because sometimes I don't, you don't see how often people think about, well, if I bring the Gen AI stack into my four walls, but I'm renting an LLM, which is then somewhere else, well, oh, by the way, guess where your data goes? Goes out to that LLM, right? Like you need to think about these things, and maybe not everyone's ready for NVIDIA chips or Gaudi 2 chips from Intel to deploy on your own hardware here, but you still have to realize, how do I then deal with that? And to the point you just made, I really like that. It's one of the reasons why, our team just released a new privacy layer to deal with PII. Because if you put in a prompt and it takes in, say, Dorian Selz and his address, well, guess what? Even though I'm running, say, Squirro or a homegrown RAG solution in my stack, that PII is leaving, and it potentially could go outside your jurisdiction, which means, in the case of Dorian being in Switzerland, a GDPR requirement that then you totally didn't know you now have, right? And so what seems trivial now sets you up for a lot of compliance and risk issues. And we need to, as vendors in the space educate and help people mitigate those risks before they even know they have them. And I think that's so critical. So maybe pivoting now to the next kind of element, which is finding that value, right? Ensuring that in choosing the use cases that we think about, right? There's a whole bunch across an organization. Let's talk about the value drivers around AI readiness, because at the end of the day, all of this is fun, but we also have seen a lot of different pieces of technology that were fun that don't generate return for business. Fortunately, generative AI is not one of them. It's one of the joys of being CPO here is I get to just hear from customers all the crazy statistics that they present of all the value that we bring, and it's highly quantifiable, which I love. So maybe Nivedita, if you just want to talk to us a little bit about how you see this, right, and how you see the world, and then Dorian, I'll pivot to you to kind of walk us through this chart here as well.
Sure. Justifying the ROI has been one of the hardest conversations these days, and usually there's a mix of three ways to do it. Right? One is, oh, how does it increase my top line? How does it improve efficiencies for my bottom line? And the third is, does it improve my productivity and hence make my worker do more for lesser effort? And worst case, use lesser workers if needed. So one of the three or a combination of three is used to calculate the ROI. But like you said, David, what I have seen is the best value, I would say the best cases of value being leveraged is the ones where organizations have chosen their highest impact use case. And then focused on how do you use AI or Gen AI or a mix of that to solve for that. So instead of starting with the technology first, they have first spent time identifying the highest impact business problem that is also solvable by this technology. I'll quote an example. This is a mining company that had to spend anywhere in the quantum of 20 to 50 mil on logistics cost, because to ship their heavy cargo from point A to B, they have to choose the right vessel headed in the right direction, at the right lat long, etc. And that's a route optimization and a vessel selection problem that, if they use AI at, would deliver, we estimated an annual savings of 20 mil. Now, the execs were happy that even if this is not 100% accurate, um, compared to status quo, even if they achieve a 50% accuracy, they would still get a savings of 10 mil, which is a big enough quantum of savings compared to doing nothing. So this was a great example of the right use case, delivering a good quantum of value, justifying the investment needed upfront for usage of AI.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I think that's a great point, right? The use of AI really is fundamentally so different than a lot of these other technology waves we've seen, where even to your point, even if we don't get to 100% of the desired outcome, even getting to 50% was still a $10 million savings, which is just amazing. So Dorian, maybe just turning to you now. As you think about where the world is kind of headed, right? Where the value drivers are. Can you kind of talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing, what you're hearing in the space?
Yeah, I think simply adding to the points we just already made. Nivedita, thank you. I think the best value that I see at the moment is in and around initially, sure, this customer support, knowledge management cases, no question. They're always, especially the knowledge management elements, justified with hours saved per day, per week, whatever, and they get to gigantic numbers. There is a bit of an element in there. This is a repeat of the good old enterprise search thing. Good enterprise search saves you so many hours. Now, the problem is these folks are anyway there. They're anyway paid, they're on the payroll. So technically, the saving isn't really there because the payment still is being made. Now, obviously, their argument goes they can do now other stuff and more value stuff. That might be true to some extent. But nevertheless, if people kind of like argue a case along these lines to get started and to get familiarized with the solution, I'm all in favor of that. Because at the end, it's a great way to kind of like test out the capabilities of such new functionality in an enterprise setup. The value that I do see, however, in terms of real value add, is if you start to do specific knowledge apps. As an example, here on this page, one we have is RFP, RFI app. So many organizations in their sales processes need to answer to complex RFIs, RFPs of possible customers of theirs. This is a very structured way to query, as an example, a database with all your product information, all your marketing collateral, and you can automate that. That's actually true value add. Or in the same way for a company, say in the legal space that does a lot of due diligence work. If you have a data room and you need to go query that in a structured format, here we go. That are actual value add cases. Step 2. Step 3, I think the actual value then comes from looking at processes across of these boxes here. So what you see to the right is every of these boxes, supply, service, etc., are in itself a box of IT boxes. Say in sales, you have Salesforce, maybe you have HubSpot, and supply, you have maybe an Oracle-based solution, whatever it is, then a bit back office and Microsoft. Today, most organizations struggle mightily in interconnecting these boxes. So if sales element, what they say, a service element comes in, service request comes in, it's tough actually to tie in the information from the sales system down to the supply chain system. With generative AI and that core capacity to deal with ambiguous data sets, that is possible. That is an immediate value add. Why? Because you can cut down on a number of hours spent to traverse these systems manually. Step 2, there you start to see true value in terms of efficiency gains, productivity gains, cost reductions, eventually even revenue generation elements. We have such a customer that tells, because you're now able to satisfy certain SLAs we have promised to the market, way better, and we talk here more than 50% better, I can give away some of that savings to the marketplace. And with that, I actually get into a better market position. And then that is what we do at the moment. I think the next one will be really all about rethinking this box here, because this here, the support value chain diagram, at the end of the day, still has a pretty static view on what a company is. A company is all of these boxes within a big umbrella box. What you now can do with Gen AI, you can actually kind of like loosen that all up, because you have now the connecting fabric between those boxes. So what I bet the audience that we're going to see over the next 5 years is a ton of new business models, of new business relationships, whereby you kind of like disintermediate and re-intermediate a good chunk of that landscape. And those will be the ones in terms of value generation. Those will be the use cases in terms of value generation that really will make a difference long term in the economic fabric of our companies.
Yeah, and I think that's great because what I always love in this image is just the fact that similar to other technology waves like the internet, right? Generative AI is just fundamentally changing the way businesses do business, the way they organize themselves, the way they staff, the way an employee comes to work, right? Obviously, everyone loves to talk about agentic workflow these days, but none of it matters if you can't scale out your private, sensitive internal data to the right people at the right time first, before those fun little digital agents can all run about that we all have hopes and dreams of. So maybe, with the last couple of minutes, wanted to just kind of finish with thinking about maximizing that ROI in terms of what you're doing. So if today we started around how do we get ready, we went into how do you scale and do this securely. What I would like to finish up with is how do you maximize that ROI? And then more specifically, get into where are the right things to go out and get a vendor versus where are the right things to build internally. And I know we'll probably all have enough opinions on this part of the topic that we could go for quite some time. But maybe just Nivedita, turning to you to kind of get us going on this last part of today's webinar. What are you seeing? Can you give us an example or two? You're on mute, Nivedita.
Cool. Very quickly, what I'm seeing as trends is two two dimensions to it. One is the smaller organizations, which might not have enough resources to justify the capex upfront, are more open to the buy decision because they want to see the ROI or the benefits before they even think about building it themselves. So very open to buy. This is the smaller orgs. Now with enterprises, especially financial orgs, they have a more complex decision landscape to handle. While on one hand, just building your own model or fine-tuning an existing model takes a capex of anywhere from 5 to 20 mil and around 15K a year of OPEX. That's the estimate. So it's huge investments. They are more concerned about the risk and the management of it, the reputational risk that we have discussed. So because of the compliance and the risk part, they can go in favor of build initially because they find it hard to trust an external vendor. But if that is managed and the external vendor has delivered enough productivity or enough gains that they see that it's solving the problem I'm trying to solve, then they are open to the, I would say, buy question as well. So if as long as they have control over the risks and if you deploy it in their tenant and come up with a model that works for both, so that another point of view I have seen is fine, I'm a large org, I have the resources to build as well, but for the more fringe problems, I am more open, such as CX. That's not my core competency. I am more open to working with an external vendor for my CX challenges versus if it's around my customer propensity, customer repeat purchase propensity model. That is where I'll deploy my own data scientist team and build my own AI infra. But CX, I will focus on getting a vendor and working with them on that. So it also depends on how crucial is the problem for me. Is it part of my core competency?
Yeah. Yeah. And Dorian, I think you've got a great model that you walk through. So maybe if you could walk us through your build versus buy decision tree, because I think this is a great way to look at Gen AI, because it isn't just about model over here or use case over there. There is a pretty large swath of technology needed to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. In agile land, which you all are in, this is actually classic waterfall. It's essentially a waterfall that starts with what do you want to achieve? Is it strategic or not? If it is strategic, okay, you might want to have it kind of like under your own control, so try to go and advance to the next stage. If it's non-strategic, definitely go by. And now we can run through that whole waterfall. Given the time, I want to be a bit short. But I want to maybe highlight one or two elements. I think every organization that says, oh, I'm actually the best to build Gen AI should ask themselves the next question. What is my core USB? And outside that core USB, your core USB can, I don't know, manufacturing cars, or it can be a bank, whatever. How much of additional elements are your core USP outside that what you really do in your industry? So I have not seen, as an example, an airline company building their own airplanes. I have not seen, as an example, a car company building their own windscreens. They all purchase that from somewhere else. It's the same here. And then you can run down all the way to with whom would you partner? And I made a couple of points about the difference between pilot and production, which is harsh, especially if you kind of like need to comply with security, accuracy, permission enablement, the scale pace. So these are all questions that you need to answer really hard, find good answers for these really hard questions. And then at the end of the day, it's also a question about cost and efficiency. I made that point earlier in our webinar today. While it's thought to be cheap on pilot level, it's not cheap on production level. And I think what's often overlooked, even though it's a shiny new object and any CIO wants to go at that, what other initiatives do we crowd out? What other initiatives in my business do I crowd out because I suddenly send all my team to build Gen AI, as opposed to, as an example, build good old process improvement elements into my factory? Right? If that is my core competence, I'd rather do that than go and build new shiny objects, because that's actually where I earn the money. And that's actually going to be my core competence. Anyway, this is a waterfall, and obviously we share that with the audience post-webinar.
Yeah, and thanks. That's so great. And maybe just to, wrap up, Dorian, on this slide, I really do love this visual, because it takes that waterfall and then it applies it to all the different things that if someone says, oh, I'm going to magically wake up tomorrow and build my entire Gen AI stack from scratch, you have to build all of these elements. So maybe as a great place to wrap up in terms of AI readiness, let's be honest with ourselves, most organizations will not be able to say that they are the best thing versus all their competitors at all of these elements, plus their own first party data, plus all throughout the other elements. So maybe just a brief way to end on the way forward that you see, the way forward that you see large scale enterprises deploying, and how we can kind of put a bow on this topic today of AI readiness.
Look, it's the good old conundrum of relative competitive advantage. People who do day in, day out, nothing else, and index operations have probably a bit of an advantage over people who do that only occasionally. In the old days of classic economics, it was all about getting wine out of Portugal, and I believe getting bread out of Britain, or so it went, with Pareto optimal distribution elements. It's the same here. Go and work with folks that know what they do on the lower levels. No one will actually go and build their own foundational models. And in the same way, no one's going to build their own PCs. You're going to buy them. So do the same here. And instead, take your energies, take your know-how, take your creativity, and apply that, how to apply this type of new technology to specific use cases, of which we touched upon a few. That makes a difference. So it's this combination of expertise of people that provide the foundational, the kind of like core scaffolding, plus your own expertise, whereby you then effectively put that into production at your own company to the benefit of your own company. I think that's the combination.
Yeah, and I think that's a great place to kind of end. Just to kind of wrap this up, this is where Squirro sits, right? That foundational platform that allows enterprises to build out their use cases and scale, right? Just yesterday I was talking with an analyst about energy consumption in the AI world, and she said the biggest thing that organizations can do around their sustainability rankings and what they are already being forced to do is, when it comes to AI, think about not having to rinse and repeat a new AI stack for every use case, because that doesn't scale. It won't help them from an organization. It won't get them the ROI. And then because the topic we were chatting about was around sustainability, it won't help them achieve their sustainability goals, especially when AI is so energy heavy. And so that is where we end today. Dorian, thank you for sharing. I love that waterfall around helping people understand, when it comes to being AI ready, how do they think about the elements that they build? How do they think about how to partner? I know you say buy. I always think of it in the partner context. Vendors should be your partner for success. Nivedita, thank you for your examples, your stories that you told. I love the pillars that you kind of highlighted, and the four elements of strategy. So thank you both for your time today. Audience, hopefully you found this informative and helpful. And as always, feel free to reach out. We love to chat. We love to talk about this. As I just mentioned about talking with the analyst yesterday on sustainability, this is what we do. We'd love to share our lessons learned to hopefully get to ROI for you faster. So thank you very much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. Pleasure.
Thank you.